The police station in Mabaruma is in no way remarkable. It's a small compound in Guyana's northwest region, housed in the kind of building people walk past without a second look. But in early 2018, officers there are looking into something they don't quite know what to do with. A young woman in the settlement has been telling her family that something has been coming for her at night. Not a person, but something she can't explain, and that gets to her while she's asleep. Her relatives are worried, and the neighbor eventually takes it upon himself to go to the police. Then, while officers are looking into it, the police station itself comes under attack. The bricks come from nowhere anyone can see. Nobody at the police station can say who's throwing them or from where. They just keep arriving one after another, hitting the walls and the roof in a rhythm that doesn't let up. By morning, the people of Mabaruma have already agreed on what happened. Their explanation is one that has been kept alive through oral retelling. You see, they say, the culprit is the Baku. Let's try and understand what a Baku is, because there's a good chance you've never heard the word before. Even if you are Caribbean, it's known best in Guyana and Suriname, but it also turns up in places like Barbados and Trinidad, though sometimes under a slightly different name. So picture something small, not child-sized, but even smaller than that. Something you could almost mistake for a doll at first glance. The Baku has big eyes and long arms and legs that don't quite match the rest of its body. And there's one detail that shows up in every retelling. It has no kneecaps. Now, don't ask me how that works because I can't answer that. Some versions of the story say the Baku is not fully made of flesh, that part of it is made of wood, stitched or grown together with skin somehow, which, if you think about it for more than 1 second, is a genuinely unsettling image. Now imagine you would like to get your hands on a Baku. Where would one even acquire such a creature? The tradition is fuzzy on that part. Some tellings say you have to catch one yourself. You trap it and get a bottle over it before it knows what's happening. Because that's where you're supposed to keep a Baku, in a bottle. Others say you need a specialist to get one, what's called an obeya man. That's the kind of person you call on for anything spirit related. They know how to broker a deal with a Baku safely, or I guess as safely as it gets when it involves a Baku. But a more important question I'm sure you have, and thanks for bearing with me on this one, is why would anyone want to catch a Baku? Well, because this creepy creature can bring you money and good fortune. Or it can do a job for you, sometimes a dirty one you'd rather not deal with yourself. So yes, catching a Baku can be quite a cheat code for life. And once you've got one, you're supposed to keep it in a bottle. You feed it milk and a small reddish banana called bakuba. And yes, specifically that. It is a very specific eater. If you keep it fed and you keep it happy, it will work for you. People in Guyana still tell stories about two particular Bakus from the olden days named Boise and Boya. They supposedly lived near a place called Stewartville, and you didn't want to speak badly about them because if you did, bad things would happen to you. One story says they covered a man in feces just for talking trash about them. Now here's the catch. Isn't there always a catch? So you have to feed it every single day, milk and the bananas, without fail. Because the moment you forget, or you run out, or you're just tired of dealing with a bottle spirit's dietary needs, it turns on you. It throws stones at your house. It beats you. It makes your life miserable until you either fix the situation or you rid yourself of it entirely. But getting rid of one is apparently no small task. A well-fed Baku goes in and out of the bottle to do its work and comes back on its own. A neglected one doesn't. Once it's turned on you, getting rid of it means winning it back into the bottle one more time, the same way you got it in the first place. Milk, bananas, and patience, until it goes back in and you can cork it shut and get it to the sea. If you ever find a corked bottle washed up on the beach, do not open it. You don't know what deal the last person made, and you don't know if it's still hungry. Okay, so far this sounds almost cute, right? I guess. A cranky little wish-granting roommate who needs feeding, like a supernatural houseplant, but now with opinions. That's usually about where most retellings of this story stop. And if you Google it, most of what comes up treats the Baku as basically a Caribbean genie. But that's not really the whole deal. Because in the fuller version of this tradition, the ones researchers have actually sat down and documented across Guyana and Suriname, the price of that wealth isn't just remembering to buy bananas. The price is a life, often someone close by the owner of the Baku, like a family member or a friend. The spirit brings you money, but at some point, someone you love pays for it. Guyana and Suriname sit on the northeastern shoulder of South America, right where the continent touches the Caribbean Sea. The Lokono and Kalina peoples were already living along these coasts and rivers long before anyone else arrived. They endured invasion and dispossession as Europeans stole the region for themselves. Then came the transatlantic slave trade, dragging enormous numbers of enslaved Africans onto plantations along the coast. Some of them refused to stay enslaved. They escaped into the interior, and through years of resistance and hard-won treaties with colonial powers, built free communities in the rainforests that still exist today. Their descendants are known as Maroons, specifically the Samaka and the Njuka, among others. And they still live largely along the rivers of the Surinamese interior and beyond, with their own language, their own culture, and their own name for this same spirit, Bakulu or Baku. Then, after slavery was formally abolished and the plantations still needed labor, indentured servitude was introduced by the colonizers, bringing enormous numbers of workers over from India under contracts advertised as opportunity. What they arrived to, though, was harsh, coercive, and heavily controlled plantation labor. Their descendants make up a huge portion of both Guyana's and Suriname's population today. They're often called Indo-Guyanese or, in Suriname, Hindustani. So you end up with a region where African, indigenous, and Indian communities were all placed next to each other. And they were all extracting a living out of the same scarce economy. And all of that was engineered by people who understood perfectly well that groups who don't trust each other are a lot easier to control than groups who do. And in a place where wealth was quite literally and quite recently built directly on human life, first through slavery and then through a system of indenture, a folktale about wealth costing somebody's life isn't really superstition. The Baku doesn't just represent that history in the abstract. People use it to accuse each other even now, in the present day. Nobody says the Baku is colonialism. Nobody says the Baku is a plantation economy that ran on stolen labor for 300 years and then handed down an economic system where getting ahead has always meant somebody else falling behind. Because that would mean naming the actual machine. It's much safer and much easier to say it's your neighbor's fault, that he made a deal and that his family will pay accordingly for that deal. Which might be the real function of a story like this. Not to explain magic, but to enable people to live inside a genuinely unfair economy without having to deal directly with what made it unfair. Anyway, back to the Baku, back to 2018 and that police station. So nobody outside that town knows what was really happening to that young woman or what hit those station walls that week. What's clear is that by morning, nobody in Mabaruma was asking those questions anymore because they already had their answer. And the Baku story hasn't slowed down since. Guyana went through a massive oil boom in the last decade, enormous new wealth arriving fast and flowing to a relatively small number of people. Guyanese newspaper columnists, only half-jokingly, started calling the extraction the work of an oil Baku, pointing at one of the biggest oil companies in the world and suggesting with a wink that maybe the Baku was awfully well fed these days. Also, one of the country's major papers runs a column every single Sunday called The Baku Speaks. It's written as though the spirit itself is doing the talking, predicting the week's disasters, scandals, and gossip in a tone that's somewhere between a joke and a warning. Somewhere in Guyana, or in Suriname tonight, someone is looking at a neighbor's new roof or a cousin's new car and doing that old folkloric math. Not wondering who financed it, but who it cost. In this particular part of the world, sudden wealth has never once come free. And the story everyone already half believes is that the bill doesn't get paid in money, it gets paid in someone you care about.